There's more to Listen Up than what you see on TV. Travel with us as we travel on Facebook and Twitter. Join the community where you'll find blogs to comment on, questions to answer. Pay us a visit at listenuptv.com. When it comes to wrestling out the conflicts between a worldview in which God is at the center and one in which he's absent, our next guest is an expert. Dr. James Peterson is professor of theology and ethics. We caught up with him on his home turf, the campus of McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario.
Science is very good at what it does. Science carefully observes and describes how one material thing affects another. But that's only part of what's real. What you can wrap your knuckles on is only part of reality, and science only addresses that part. And science doesn't even begin to address values, priorities, what's important, why do this and not that. In fact, science can't scientifically give a reason for why it's good to study science. So science is very powerful and useful in its sphere, but there's much more to the world than just what science can discover. And so it needs worldview, faith, your philosophy, your understanding of life to make sense of it.
Dr. Peterson asserts that controversy sometimes arises when the long-standing traditions of faith and science collide.
I think the classic example that always comes up is that of Galileo, where there was a real conflict, not between science and Christians, but between people who were convinced Christians and who were also studying observational information. And they put this together and they started to think, you might be able to explain our part of space best if the sun's going around us rather than us going around the sun, or just trying to figure that out. And they ran into the problem that there were some scriptural texts that said Abraham stayed until the sun set. And so they thought, well, gee, there you go. It's the sun that's doing the moving. And Galileo said, no, I think it might very well be that it just means it got dark.
Tucked away in a corner of the Mills Library is McMaster's best-kept secret, its archives. Some of the written work of history's great men of science is stored here, like Galileo's book, The Dialogues, the book that turned the world upside down, or rather, put it in its heliocentric place.
It's particularly interesting in that it's a dialogue between three characters. One character is representing what Galileo thought. A second one is an interlocutor, somebody who's asking good, reasonable questions. And then there's a third character, the fool, who is asking questions that doubt Galileo's theory. And then in the course of the book, he can give his reasons and explanations.
So he wrote his theory as a story?
It's in a story form, right? These three characters dialoguing with each other, and that's where the name dialogue comes from.
But some of history's great men of science were also men of great faith. Both fields of study probing for answers to life's biggest mysteries.
What's interesting, though, is that attitude of trying to better understand how things work and why they are the way they are is something that's been characteristic of science and the Christian faith right from the beginning of science. The very first full-time scientists were priests and monks who were in the employ of the church. And their job was to help train new pastors and leaders in the church. So at the University of Bologna in 1150, the first university, that was founded by the church to train leaders for the church. And you had a curriculum. You could study the book of God's words and the book of God's works. And so there were people whose full-time job it was to better know and serve God was to study the book of God's works, the kind of world that God has made. And so that pattern of the church establishing what have become the world's great universities and of science and faith being integrally linked is one that we see all the way through.
In 1200, the University of Paris. 1226, Oxford University. Cambridge, Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. All theological universities founded to study and learn about the world God made.
So science and the Christian faith have actually worked very closely together for many, many centuries. The idea that they're somehow inimical to each other is a myth.
Reporting from the Divinity College at McMaster University, for Listen Up TV, I'm Ricky Ratliff.
When we come back, one of the leading scientists in the Western world talks about his personal faith in God. The man who led the effort to map the human genome, Dr. Francis Collins, here on Listen Up, next.